Diaz takes a look at the town where the biggest manhunt in history came to an end.
A year on from the dramatic end to the hunt for Bin Laden, and Pakistan's most notorious town is trying its best to forget an uneasy anniversary. While US Navy SEALs acknowledge one of their most distinguished achievements, locals in Abbottabad are keen to forget it. But given the speculation and controversy that continues to surround the event, that will prove difficult. For months after the attack, the Pakistani military banned access to the compound, and the Americans refused to answer any in-depth questions about the operation. Combined, this generated rumour and conspiracy theories.
First of all, Obama was not here. This was a fabrication against the agencies and the armed forces, but Obama wasn't here from what I understand.
You see, he was not there and could not have been there. I heard there was an American office. So how could he be in the same place where there was an American office? How can anyone believe that?
Situated in the north of Pakistan, Abbottabad sits on the Karakoram Highway, the historic route that links Pakistan with China through the Himalayas. Until May the 2nd last year, it was known mainly for its scenery, clement weather and exemplary military and academic institutes. But all of that changed after US forces staged a unilateral raid on a compound there, killing the Al-Qaeda terrorist chief. The spectacular attack took place in the early hours of the morning and went unnoticed by most residents. But one local who did witness the operation was night shift worker and Twitter user Sohaib Attar.
So I was working and I heard this helicopter, which is actually a rare occasion in Abbottabad because there's no airport and planes do not normally fly over Abbottabad for any reason. So usually helicopters pass through, they come from one end and go to the other end, but this one stayed in the air for significantly longer. So that was, since it was too noisy, so that caught my suspicion and I tweeted about it. Then there was the explosion after, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes probably. So I tweeted about that.
Such was the political sensitivity surrounding the Bin Laden raid. The Pakistani authorities sealed off the compound and demolished it without warning 9 months later. But that didn't stop the curious from trying to visit the site in the meantime. The Danish ambassador, his wife and a couple of French journalists all attempted to visit the compound and were all briefly detained by the authorities. As the anniversary of the operation comes round, Abbottabad will be under the spotlight once more, putting pay to any hope that the town can disappear into obscurity anytime soon. Faizan Fiaz, CCTV, Islam.
And we can make contact with Faizana Fiaz, our correspondent in Islamabad. Welcome, Faizana. Thanks for your report. Just explain to us, if you will, how the current situation as far as security is concerned in Pakistan is now, and is security in fact better without Osama Bin Laden?
Well, that's the question that's been on the lips of many a foreign observer and analyst in the last year since that raid in Abbottabad on May the 2nd. If we look at it in three different areas, for example, let's start with the militant attacks, the terrorist attacks that have plagued Pakistan over the last decade or so. Those attacks could be said to have become more sporadic, less centered on the major cities as they have been. But generally they're still happening. We still hear news on a regular basis of militant attacks that kill and maim mostly civilians here in Pakistan. Secondly, there's the issue of the drone attacks, the US-sponsored drone attacks that continue apace in the northern regions of Pakistan, South Waziristan and North Waziristan and South Waziristan, rather, in particular. We know that in the year since Osama Bin Laden was killed, there have been no less than 60 of those drone attacks, which draw some heavy criticism by large sections of the Pakistani civilian community, who complain of collateral damage and too many civilian deaths. Last of all, and just as an as an incidental, this last few days, in the last week or so, there've been one or two security warnings issued by some of the Western embassies here in Islamabad. The United States, of course, issued a warning on their website urging its citizens to stay away from marketplaces and from restaurants and so on in the Islamabad area over this particular period. The French embassy as well, we understand, is also warning its citizens to remain vigilant, and these apparently warnings have been issued because of a specific threat, although those confirms of that threat have been unsubstantiated by the Pakistani authorities. But now I want to turn my attention to a guest that we have joining us today, Mr. Sultan Hali, who is a security analyst and also the host of the Defence and Diplomacy program here in Pakistan. Mr. Hali, can I start by asking you about another subject that is related to today's very special anniversary? President Obama of the US has made a surprise visit to Kabul. Can I ask you what you view as the significance of this visit to the AFPAC region?
Thank you, Farzana, for asking. I believe it has two effects, one long-term and one short-term. Let's talk about the short-term first. Obviously, President Obama chose this particular date because this is the anniversary, the first anniversary of the attack which apparently took out Osama Bin Laden. And it has a lot of significance, especially in the memories of the Americans who treated him as enemy number one. Not that he was very much loved in Pakistan either. But he wants to gain on this particular action by, you see, appealing to the masses in America who are going to likely vote for him this particular November when the presidential elections come up. Although there has been a lot of criticism also from his opponent Mitt Romney, and now the US Navy SEALs have come up that President Obama should not be politicizing this particular attack. That is as far as the short-term gains are concerned. But in the long term, you must remember that President Obama used this particular visit to clinch a deal with President Hamid Karzai, at which Hamid Karzai was of course dragging his feet, and that was an extension of another 10 years for the stay of US security forces in Afghanistan. Of course, these are under the garb of trainers as well as special forces, but they will give a legitimate stay. And this is contrary to the interests of the neighbors of Afghanistan, because if you recall, in the Bonn conference last year, December 5th, two major neighbors, of course, Pakistan had boycotted that, China and Iran had very clearly spelled out that any solution in Afghanistan must be Afghan-led. And if a third country has to be involved, it must be one of the neighbors and not anyone outside. So in the long run, which is going to be extended up to 2024, this will have ramifications not only for Afghanistan, but also for its neighbors like Pakistan, but more importantly for China, as well as Tehran, against whom America has been making overtures of wartime movements.
Okay, and speaking about the United States here, the significance of US-Pakistan relations over the last year, post-Bin Laden, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me very briefly touch upon pre-Bin Laden. The Raymond Davis affair was the straw that virtually broke the camel's back, and Pakistan and US, although they have been erstwhile allies in the war on terror, and for 10 years Pakistan had bent backwards to accommodate not only the US attacks, but had provided the means by which over 600 Al-Qaeda elements had been apprehended. But the Raymond Davis affair laid bare the trust deficit that was developing for some time. But then, of course, what happened on May the 2nd, which was just a year back, was that Pakistan considers that its sovereignty was breached because Pakistan was not taken into confidence. And to make matters worse, the US, especially its administration and its media, they tried to ridicule Pakistan, and they said, even Leon Panetta went to the extent of saying that either Pakistan was complicit or it is incompetent. But following that particular year, in November 26th, what happened was at Salalah, the NATO forces, which were led at that time by the United States, they carried out an attack in which 24 soldiers were killed. After that, Pakistan decided to stop the NATO routes, the supply route which was coming from Pakistan, and matters have gone worse. Following that, Pakistan has been demanding an apology from the United States for this particular assassination or murder or killing of its soldiers, but the United States has declined. Therefore, the situation as it stands today is that Mark Grossman, the special envoy of Obama, who was here in in Pakistan only last week, his talks failed, and so far there has been no breakthrough. So I personally see that there has been no patching up of the movements, but instead there is going to be bad blood. And what my personal opinion is that we can afford to have bad blood between two erstwhile allies because we have a common enemy.
Well, thank you very much for those very sobering thoughts, Mr. Hali. It goes to show the seriousness of the situation here in Pakistan doesn't seem to have been resolved 1 year post Bin Laden. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much indeed, Farzana Fias, reporting to us from the place, of course, where Osama Bin Laden was killed 1 year ago. Well, 5 people have died and more than 100 others have been wounded in the most recent clashes near Egypt's defense ministry. Armed men attacked Islamist